They call him Seatin, the man of legends.
So, you've just hit level 50. You're completely naked. Well, probably not completely naked, but either way, you want to know how to get the gear. This is what this video is for. Today we're going to be teaching you how to get endgame gear in Archeage, and where you can kind of start gearing up and the various routes to follow from that. So, initially via the quest lines, a few quest lines in Hasla and also Carcassy Ridgelands, you can get sort of starter level 50 gear. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you, for those of you who may have not quested in Hasla or Carcassy Ridgelands, because you use labour burning or PvP to get to max level, I'm just going to show you quickly where you get various bits of gear from. So, in Gale Garden, there are two quests. One will be called Fertilizer Formula, and that involves killing 5 doe, and that will give you either the bow, shield, or a loot. So, basically, choose wisely on that one, depending on your class and spec, and then you have another quest which will give you, it's called Good for the Heart, involves killing deer, lots of doe and deer killing, and that will give you the chest, wrists and hands. Now there's no prerequisite quest to these two quests, so you can just go to Gale Garden and get them. It's pretty easy to do. The other quest is just up in the, I believe it's the Cursed Village, so there are actually 3 quests to this, but this one, 3 prerequisite quests to this, but the quest is called In Line of Duty. To previously do that, you have to do Restoring Their Senses, The Sick and the Plagued, and Chasing Rumours. Now, doing the In Line of Duty quest will reward you with a primary weapon, so this will either be a one-handed sword, a two-handed noted chai, or a two-handed staff, so a really strong weapon for pretty much any class that you're playing. So those are all the gear quests in Hasla. If we're moving over to Carcassy Ridgelands, in, I believe, Iona, you'll have a quest for, let me just have a look, it is the lower armor set, so legs, feet and waist, where basically you have to do a pre-quest where you capture a wormkin, so you just go around sort of the northern part of Iona, capture a wormkin, and then it will unlock an additional quest towards the bottom of Iona called the Red Scale Chieftain, which will basically require you to kill a large red scale mob. It's very easy to do, and that will reward you with the legs, feet and waist, which are completely randomized like pretty much all of the gear that you buy here, or well, you get from the quest rewards, so you really can't tell if it's going to be good or not. So it's a bit of a gamble, but it's the only way to get sort of initial level 50 gear, and most of this stuff, like pretty much 75% of the time, will be quite useful. And the final quest for a helmet is located in Dragon Roar Fortress. You initially need to do a quest called the Minotaur's Madness, which is kind of around, I believe it's kind of around this part, I'm not entirely sure, and then that will unlock another quest called the Shaman of Dragon Roar, which will be around here, and that will reward you with your helmet. So you got a full collection of fresh level 50 gear there, apart from sort of rings, rings and earrings and a necklace. Now you can buy fairly decent rings, earrings and necklaces off the auction house. There are some really good and really cheap low level ones. Now the stats on these aren't good, but the equip effects, such as the attack speed increases, are brilliant. They're just so damn good. So just literally search a local auction house. You can buy some really crappy rings and a necklace, and that will give you, you know, some sort of stat increase that will be worthwhile for doing the next activities. So once you have all of that gear, now what? Now the next thing you'll probably want to do is farm an area known as Hasla. Now at the moment, because the game is really newly launched, this area is really busy, like just absolutely insanely busy all of the time. You will find just literally hundreds of people every time you go here, but essentially what you'll need to do is when you kill any mob in this zone, it will drop, I believe it's one of 7 random marks now. You can forge 150 of these marks together using the forge that's located here, and if you tarnish Hasla relics to create amazing weapons. Like, these weapons are so good, and these weapons will not be matched by anything that you can craft for like under several hundred gold. So these weapons are just brilliant, and it's definitely something that you need to do, and you can see by sort of the strength of these weapons in comparison to the ones that you will get via leveling and quest questing, that they are something that is definitely sought after. Killing just random mobs in this zone gives you 1 token each. It can be one of the 7 random tokens. You can also forge any all 7 tokens together, so if you're solo farming this, to create something called an Arctic Earthstone, and then what you can do is you can use that Arctic Earthstone and turn that into 5 of any token. So if you're specifically farming just 1 weapon, that's a very easy and quicker way to do it solo. However, regardless of how you do it, it still is a bit of a grind and is going to take some time, but for larger guilds and groups of players, there is a really good way to do this. Now, whenever I believe it gets to about 1800 in-game time, so 6 o'clock in-game time, so that's going to be roughly every 4 hours, what's going to happen is something known as the Hasla Rift is going to spawn. This is going to spawn larger, more elite enemies that when you kill them, they drop 20 of a certain token. So, as you can imagine, this speeds up the farming process really, absolutely tons, and can mean that you can farm your weapons for maybe your guild or your group a lot quicker. However, it is extremely competitive around this time, so this is also a good place to come if you're looking for PvP. So yeah, that's a bit of a pro tip about that. But once you've got your Hasla weapon, a lot of people are wondering what's next. Well, there are 2 things that you can do really. There are 2 dungeons. There's one in Rookborn Basin called Crowlau Cradle. Now this drops a variety of really nice sort of necklaces, rings and earrings, so that's a brilliant dungeon for accessories, and it's suggested that you run there a few times. It is quite a challenge, so it's suggested that you get the Hasla weapons before attempting it, and also ensure that you stock up on various mana potions and also vegetable, I believe it's called vegetable soup, that's the one, because literally on long boss fights a lot of classes have issues with mana regeneration, so that is why it is very important to, you know, stock up on that. So there's also another dungeon called Great Howling Abyss. This can be found in Northern Hell Swamp. It actually has a quest associated to completing the dungeon that will give you a very nice loot, so that will provide a nice kind of stat increase to everybody for, you know, initially running the dungeon, and the dungeon itself drops a wide variety of sort of endgame loot. So there's a lot of nice loot that you can get there that can potentially be a nice upgrade to some of the items that you got via questing. However, for sort of ease of the dungeon, it is suggested that you try and get your Hasla weapons first, but it is possible to do without Hasla weapons. It will just take a bit more time and patience to actually get used to the dungeon and mechanics. It just becomes a lot easier with the weapons because they do make your character a lot more powerful. So a lot of people are wondering, you know, where do I go from there? How do I get even more gear? You know, I've done the Hasla weapons, I've got the GHA stuff. Now it all goes really into crafting now. Literally that is the way that you progress at endgame. You craft gear, you go out in the world, you gather money, you gather resources. Now, the kind of main tier of gear that will be useful to a level 50 and start becoming an upgrade is the Illustrious set. Now, unfortunately, crafting is a bit of an RNGesus game in Archeage, just due to the fact that once you get to Illustrious, you have no idea what kind of stats the gear that you craft is going to produce, but basically it can sometimes just be amazing, it can sometimes be quite crappy, so this is a bit of a cause of frustration, but basically that is the way that you go about it. Illustrious gear will start becoming better than your level 50 gear when you get to sort of Delphinand gear. That is just like amazing gear. There are also various things you can do, such as regrading, socketing, enchanting to actually gear up, but the primary way of crafting gear, which we're talking about today, obtaining gear, is actually just crafting it. So as you can see, once you get to the illustrious stuff, it will become a lot better. But of course it is quite expensive to make and does require you to increase your proficiency or get somebody else to get their increased proficiency in level working, tailoring or metalwork. You can also buy any of this gear off the auction house for those people who can't be asked to craft it, but usually, just as a word of warning, the gear purchased via the auction house is usually worse, because that's kind of like the bad procs that people have had on the gear, and they're like, oh, you know, I want to try and craft a better item, let's sell this one. So just make sure, you know, you look at an item carefully to see if it is worth the kind of price that they are selling it for. So that's pretty much it for a very, very plain and simple overview of how you progress in your gear at Archeage. So it's 1, initially do the quest, 2, try and get the Hasla weapons, 3, farm the dungeons, and then 4 is crafting. I mean, you have additional things thrown in, such as, for example, world bosses. They do drop okay-ish gear, it's not brilliant, but for example, bosses like the Kraken, who are kind of located just in southern Aurora, currently do drop kind of the best weapons in the game, so that's something to sort of be in mind, though, you know, keep in mind. But the Kraken is very difficult to kill, and you will need a very, very large group of 50 plus people and 10 plus galleons to actually take the Kraken down, but we'll do more about that in the future. So just one thing that I want to kind of finally mention for those people who may be wondering, oh, you know, I can't craft gear, I can't make money, I can't do anything. Well, a lot better gear will be available once Aurora releases and all these zones become active. A lot of really nice gear drops from it and can be obtained from Aurora, so don't you worry. Alternative methods to gear up in Archeage are coming, and so you can compete with people who are, you know, just doing amazing crafting gear and dropping so much gold on the game. But yeah, just keep that in mind, that for now, gear is kind of just like a temporary thing. Pretty much everyone, 90% of players, are on this kind of level where they will, you know, get their quest gear, maybe a bit of gear from the dungeons and their Hasla weapon, and then kind of be stuck on where to go. So that's kind of, you know, it's fairly standard to be like, oh, you know, I can't gear up anymore without tons of gold. And don't worry, because a lot of people are feeling this at the moment. You just have to be aware that alternative ways to gear up and become more powerful are coming with Aurora, which will be here within a few weeks' time, apparently. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the video. Take care and have an absolutely great day.